Hello and welcome to the first Righteous Reviews podcast. This is the first time for me, so I'm sorry for the quality and for any mistakes I create. The first podcast is going to be about Far Cry 2. A few months ago I had the pleasure of meeting Patrick Redding, the narrative director of Far Cry 2 from Ubisoft, and he gave us some insight into the game and some of the features that haven't yet been divulged by some of the magazines that I've been reading and some of the websites also that I've read. So hopefully we'll give you some information that no one else has actually touched upon as of yet. And without further ado, here it is.
Oh yeah, I'm Patrick Redding from Ubisoft.
It's nice to meet you. You've really shown us what the fire can do in the environment. Is there any other environmental damage from bullets, from explosions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously destructibility is going to be an important part of the game as well. I mean, fire is kind of like a thematic aspect of the game, but I mean, we didn't really pull out our big weapons of mass destruction in this game. We give the player access to a lot of different kinds of explosives as well. There are a lot of explosive objects in the game world, like propane tanks, that kind of thing, that cause explosions as well as fire. The player has access to mortars, the Carl Gustav guided missile, the RPG, like this classic RPG 7. He can also set IEDs and set them off remotely as he will. He'll pick up IED components in the game world. And so what that means is, destructibility is an important aspect of it. We have lots of different material types and lots of different architectural types in the game. Obviously, we were mostly showing outdoor settings today, but what you're going to see is a lot of both our colonial types of buildings as well as our more kind of like shantytown type constructions, as well as our more indigenous type constructions, all have varying degrees of destructibility as well as pierceability. So bullets will go through light materials. You'll see shrapnel coming off the backs of them. The player will know when he's being shot at for sure. In terms of other kinds of destructibility, in terms of natural settings, we chose not to go down the deformable terrain route. That would have been a crazy dynamic element to try to introduce into the game. Who knows? Maybe for Far Cry 3.
Excellent. How many weapons are going to be in the game?
As it stands right now, it's minimum 30, and we're looking at about 34 total. Like, we have 4 extra weapons that we're in the process of testing them. We're tuning them up. We're trying to decide whether or not to include them. Mainly, we want to make sure there's enough variety in the weapons. We don't want to have like a bunch of weapons that are all exactly the same. So that everybody defaults to kind of one approach. But the ones that we have look really, really good and are polishing along really nicely. We've actually since this demo, we've done completely new sound builds, and actually all of our textures have been redone and re-optimized as well. So you really feel the grain of the wood on the buttstock and all that kind of stuff. But you'll see a bunch of different assault rifles, as well as submachine guns, machine pistols, grenade launchers of various types. We just introduced an automatic grenade launcher, like a big drum-fed kind that you see sometimes. The big challenge for us is we've got to balance all these weapons so that they don't completely overpower the game, and we also have to make sure they work well in multiplayer as well.
Is there any customizability on the weapons?
We don't. Yeah, it's a great question. People ask about customizability in terms of like being able to do add-ons. They obviously see games like Medal of Honor Airborne or Army of 2 or even Crisis. We decided to kind of go another route because our game is not a high-tech game, because it's very much kind of like you're in the middle of like a guerrilla brush war. We really wanted it to be about getting a hold of these kind of down and dirty weapons and being able to use them. So a lot of what we do is we give the player tools for unlocking sort of improvements in the overall quality of the weapons. So he's able to get a hold of manuals that allow him to, for example, unjam weapons more quickly or to prevent jams from happening altogether, give him better accuracy. Basically, there's a constant upgrade cycle in terms of the different weapons classes, but by dealing with arms vendors as well as sort of finding collectibles in the game world, he's able to improve the overall weapons loadout.
What about the achievements for the Xbox 360? Have you got any interesting ones for that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd love to talk about that stuff, but we're kind of keeping that stuff under wraps right now. We obviously have achievements planned for Xbox 360, and we're working out also as well the reward regime for PS3 and PC. But yeah, suffice it to say, when you have a giant open world game with a lot of ingredients like this, a lot of different kinds of ingredients, there's a whole lot of achievements that we can supply the player with for sure.
And what about multiplayer? What have you got in store for multiplayer?
Right. Well, so today obviously we were really focused on single player, but our multiplayer team is making huge improvements and great strides in the game. Like every single day, we're blown away by what we're seeing. What I can tell you is every single weapon and every single vehicle, all the ingredients that you see in our single player are also available in the multiplayer game. We're supporting all of the classic shooter multiplayer modes, so obviously deathmatch, team deathmatch, capture the flag type modes, as well as kind of a VIP protection mode. All the vehicles are available for the player. We've got like a large troop transport truck, so you can load your whole team up on that truck and drive to different locations with it. It's going to be, our multiplayer offering is going to be really neat.
Is that going to be on the same size map, or is it going to be on sectioned areas?
Right, that's a very good question. Obviously, I mean, a 1 kilometer square multiplayer map would be a little hard to deal with, particularly if you're dealing with kind of like any sort of conventional numbers of players. No, obviously we're dealing with slightly smaller environments, but we definitely have like large, medium, and small types of maps to support different groups of players, and they cover all of our different biomes, all of our different architectural types. You'll see everything from like fortresses and prisons to savannah settings and villages and shanty towns. All of our different kind of locations that we'll see in the single player game. You'll also see versions of them in multiplayer.
We saw in the demo that you have a buddy coming.
Yeah.
Did you ever think of including a co-op system? Or
I mean, we absolutely talked about whether co-op was appropriate for our single-player game. I mean, our feeling was, Far Cry is fundamentally a solo survival shooter type of game, and in order to kind of feel that pressure of being kind of a solitary kind of lone fighter up against the odds, we really decided that at least for this first offering, we wanted to put the emphasis on the kind of solo single-player experience. But obviously, as we developed like the buddy system, and we started to realize how the buddy dynamic can work for the player, and it's a powerful tool for us, particularly for our story, which unfolds in a very dynamic way. We also realized that, there could be some interesting things to do with co-op. It's just not going to happen with this installment. It's something that we're definitely looking at.
And what would you say is the easiest or hardest platform to work on?
Oh boy, that's a tough call, man. I mean, obviously there's certain, I'll tell you exactly how this went down. Like we started developing this first and foremost as a PC shooter game. We really wanted to build, a kind of definitive successor to Far Cry on the PC, and also kind of show that, we're Ubisoft, but we can still do, a PC experience that's kind of top breed. And what we were surprised to learn from our engineering team is that holy smokes, we actually got this engine running on the console platforms, and they got it running because they knew that other teams were going to be interested in doing development with our engine. We weren't even thinking in terms of doing Far Cry 2 for those platforms. And when we saw it, we were like, oh my god, we can actually do this. We can pull this off. It was crazy, but we were able to adapt it. Now, obviously, that meant we had to assemble, a kind of a fleshed out team for our technical pipeline on both the PS3 side and on the Xbox 360 side. And there are definitely, there are certain complications that go along with developing for the PS3 for sure, but it also has certain strengths that we were able to take advantage of. Obviously, when you're talking about an open world game, that's a lot of data, and being able to have access to Blu-ray, being able to have access to the hard drive consistently is a very helpful thing. And then obviously there are certain economies that come about because when you look at the Xbox 360, it's essentially kind of like a little PC, so we're able to do certain things on the PC side that adapt very, very easily to the Xbox 360. But I'd say there's kind of trade-offs and checks and balances on both sides for sure.
Thank you very much for the
my pleasure. Thank you very much. Do you have a card or?